Welcome back to the table. Today, Emily and I are going to be taking a look at Get On Board, New York and London. Now, you might be familiar with the concept here because this is a re-implementation of Let's Make a Bus Route from Sashi years ago, which I don't think made it out over here. You never played that one,
I've never
right?
played it before, no.
But this one is making its way out here to the U.S. With some differences, and we'll cover some of those differences in a minute, and we do want to give you a general idea of the game. But long story short, it is a flip and write where you're making a bus route.
Still making a bus route. Kept that part the same.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, they kept a lot of things the same, and we're going to give you a little overview. We're going to show you first what we've got going on here. The main board out here, this is the 2 and 3 player side for New York. The other side is for London, and that's going to be for 4 to 5 players, which can get a little congested, which is actually one of the kind of cool things about this game. And you'll see here we've got some cards over here. We've got bus tickets, which are going to basically be the cards that are flipped to tell us what to do. And then we've got some public objectives here, which are going to be some of the things that we're going to be making our route to go around and do specific pickups in the game.
Yes. And then you see also that we have our different player counts. So we start at a stoplight, and throughout the game, you're going to be putting out your different routes to show where your bus route's going. So one of the nice things is that as you kind of get more going, especially in a higher player count game, you're going to see the whole board filling up, right, with all your little routes, and you're going to be interwoven going over each other. You just can never make your route snake, right? You never want to hit your route back again.
Yeah, in fact, if you ever were in a situation where you go back across one of the nodes or one of the intersections that you've already been across, you get eliminated from the game, which sounds pretty vicious, but the game gives you a little flexibility so that you can hopefully avoid that for the most part. The other interesting thing that's going to happen here is a lot of these routes are going to be on the same roads with other players. You can't be on the same road that you've been on, obviously, but you can be on a road with multiple players that's just going to cause traffic, which is going to be something that you're going to take potentially negative points for. And I keep gesturing down here because that is the other part of the game here. This is a flip and write. So we're flipping cards out here, but we're writing on our own pad right here. Now, there's a lot of scoring opportunities on this pad, but this pad and the board really work in sort of tandem to create this puzzle that you're trying to solve. This is not a flip and write that you're going to have a lot of combos with. There is a couple
tiny bits,
tiny little combos. There's no big long chains of combos. But like we've always said, when there's not that going on in a flip and write or a roll and write, it's usually a puzzle to solve.
Yes, it's definitely a puzzle. You also get a bit more interaction with players than you would normally, right? Because you are doing this route building and you're trying to figure out how can I do this in the best way without getting congested, without having to fight with other people for where I'm going. So there is a little bit more player interaction than you might get in a normal flip and write, roll and write, where you're all just kind of doing your own things. You don't really care what the others are doing.
Exactly. I mean, there are some games where I think you choose dice and maybe those dice aren't available to people like that. But this game, what you're doing on this board can definitely affect sort of what you're going to do in the future. Now, let's give you a general sense of what you do in this game. You're going to be, like I said, flipping these cards, but before you get to any of that, everyone is going to take 2 of those bus cards, and it's going to correspond to 2 different numbers on the map. You're going to look at where you want to start. That's where you're going to put this sort of token right here. But even before that, you're going to see these public objectives, and everyone is going to get 1 private objective. Now, the difference between the private and the publics, I'll start with the publics. These are effectively different icons that you're going to want to visit on your route. So for instance, this one here, the first person that can pick up 5 businessmen is going to get 10 points. Now, if multiple players do that on the same round, everyone gets it.
Yay!
But as you might expect, once that's done, this flips over, and for the rest of the game, anyone who does that is only going to get 6 points.
Right. It's still worth it, though. 6 points is still great.
Absolutely. But if someone gets the 10 points, don't go, oh, well, I'm not going to do that, because then you're going to lose even worse in this game. The private objectives, though, are routes that you're trying to accomplish.
A little trickier, for sure. So yeah, they're routes. They're different spots in the city that you're going to try to get your route to connect. And typically, they're pretty well spread out. So you're really going to want to take a look at it, decide, okay, I'm going to try to start somewhere near one of my points. And you're really going to have to be efficient to try to make sure you get a long enough route to somehow snake through all 3 before the game ends. Because what you didn't mention is it's only 12 actions. It's 12 rounds. And so I only have 12 moves to try to get all 3 of these spots across the board connected.
Yeah, the game moves at lightning speed.
Yes.
I've played this a few times now. Emily and I just played it the other night twice. And the first time we played it, I had forgotten you're flipping cards, and all of a sudden we were both like, whoa, we're
Like 2 to the end.
we're very close to finishing the game. It happens really fast, and it's one of those games that you can turn around and set back up again and play right away. But like I said, you're going to have those objectives, and then when you take those cards to determine where you start, you can kind of take that into consideration. The tricky thing here is you really can't get hung up on one thing or the other, but at the same time, if you try to do everything, you might fail at all of it. Like, it's really tricky to get that big, long route that's on your private objective and pick all these various passengers up along the way.
Because as you're going, each place that you go through is going to have something that you're going to mark off on your board. So, like, the easiest one is this senior citizen, and every time you go through her, you'll just mark off one spot. She's straight victory points. So the more you have of her, the more victory points it'll be at the end.
Yeah, she's probably the most basic of scoring points. The next one up is probably the student. That's the yellow one here. The student is slightly more complicated. You're going to pick up students at different nodes or intersections, and then you can also visit universities or schools at other intersections. And the scoring there at the end is going to be the number of students you've picked up times the number of universities or schools that you've visited.
Makes sense.
The businessman and the tourist are a little bit more complicated. Still, though,
very accessible.
Very accessible in general, but these guys are going to work a little bit differently. You're going to pick up businessmen and mark them off, but you're going to have to mark them off in a very specific order. Each businessman and each tourist has different lines with a bus at the end.
Yes.
When you pick up one, you're going to mark off the leftmost on the top row that doesn't have a bus already marked off. Because once you visit the location that they want to go to, you're going to see how many businessmen, or in the case of tourists you have, and then get points accordingly, and then write those points in the bus square. That effectively shuts down that whole row, and then you start the next row down.
It's very bus-like, right? You're picking up passengers. You have a set number of passengers you can pick up before you got to drop them off, and then go on to the next one. So
yeah, the idea there in general is that you want to pick up, maybe 3.
Get a full bus.
Get 3 businessmen, or in the case of tourists, 4 tourists,
which is a lot,
before you hit one of those locations. Because this is not a game where you have choices. You have choices. Let me explain that. This is not a game where you get to go to a location and say, you know what, I'm not going to drop off.
Oh, I see.
You have to do what you're told to do.
Right.
You can't say, I'm only going to go half my move. You're basically forced to do these things. That's what makes the puzzle so difficult to navigate in this game. But those are the basic people that you're going to be scoring and how they score. Now, a couple other things on these. The businessman in particular, this is where some of those combos exist.
This is the combo part, for sure.
If you deliver one businessman to an office, you're going to get 2 points, but you're also going to get one of those senior citizens. So you can go over there and knock one of those off. If you deliver 2 businessmen, you're going to get a tourist. And 3 is going to give you a student, and there's actually a specific row of students here that are reserved only for those. So if you get one of those, you definitely want to mark one of those students off, because there's no other way to mark those off. So there's a little comboing there, and then there's an interesting thing at the top of all of these boxes.
Yes, and that's so if you go to specific spots, so like for the university, if you go to Columbia in the New York side, that is where you're going to see how many of the students you have checked off. And for every student you have checked off, you're going to get to put that in your star line. So if you do it early in the game, you might only have 1 or 2. But if you do it later, at the end of your route, you might have 5 or 6, which is just extra points you're getting when you score that. And the same thing happens for the commuter. And for the tourist, it happens in 2 places, right? He has 2 different monuments he's trying to go to. So the Guggenheim and Times Square. And then whichever had the higher score, you'll take at the end. So
those
lots of opportunities to score.
Those are all the interesting characters to score. Now, there are some things that you need to keep in mind as you're maneuvering around this board. We already mentioned that you can't double back on yourself.
Correct. Yep.
The other thing is, if you're ever on a road or a street with another player's piece, or one of these darker spaces, and this is only on the New York side of the board, by the way, you're going to experience traffic. When you experience traffic, you're going to have to mark off one of these buses on the bottom of the board for each segment that you just played that has traffic going on. These are going to lead to negative points, and you can get quite a few negative points. Now, the other thing you can do is if you're really trying to get to that one location, there is some flexibility here at the top of the board.
Which is really nice. So yeah, you can take the pieces that you're getting, and instead of it being straight or turn, you can do the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So if I have 3 straight in a row, I can add in a turn or even 2 turns in there, depending on how many I want to cross off. It is going to give me negative points, but that's where the choice comes in, right? That's where the flexibility comes in. Because like David said, I might be trying to gather all my tourists before I drop them off at a monument, but oh no, if I go 3 straight, I'm going to go directly into Times Square, which I don't want to do yet. So I'm going to use one of my turns to kind of avoid that for now and hope to come back to it later.
Yeah, and the game makes the math that you'll do in your head very accessible math.
Oh, yeah.
Because something like that is going to be a situation where, like, do I want to lose maybe 2 points to be able to take an extra turn to get to Columbia on this turn because I have all these students that I want to drop off, and I'm probably not going to get back to Columbia later. So you might do that and just understand, okay, well, that's going to mean 10 points for getting to Columbia versus the negative 2 points there. So you're going to net 8 points. Like we said, this is an incredibly accessible game.
Yep.
There's only 2 other ways to score, and that is those public and private objectives. We already mentioned how you get the public ones throughout the game. You're just going to mark those off whether you get 10, 6, or 0 points. And then at the end of the game, you're basically going to confirm for everyone that you got to all 3 of the locations on your route. This is the tricky one.
It definitely is. You don't want to get to the end and be like, oh no, I missed that one, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing about this one is this is very much the thing that a player is given at the beginning of the game that you can fixate on.
Yes, you
You
could.
can absolutely look at this and go, okay, well, I'm doing this. Like,
But you
for
don't
sure.
have to. You definitely
No.
don't have to. And you could win without it for sure. Especially if you decided, I'm going to get both the shared objectives. If you get there first, that's 20 points as opposed to this 10. It's just all about what you want to do in the game, right?
Yeah.
And it lends itself to repeat games because you can do different things each time. You can say, last time I really focused on this, but this time I want to see what else the game has to offer, right? I want to see what else cool ways I could get points that looks like. One other cool thing we didn't mention yet is that there's also these traffic lights,
Yeah.
right? So they're a little extra puzzle too. If you end your route for a turn on a traffic light, so if I ended right here, I get to put down 1 extra route. And this is really helpful in trying to make your route longer and longer, which will help with that personal objective because you're like, how am I going to get all 3 connected? Well, if every couple turns you're getting an extra route, you're getting a little bit further, a little bit faster.
Yeah, if you can string those together, those are very beneficial to finishing that route on your private objective card or getting to that one location that you definitely wanted to get to by the end of the game. Now, as Emily pointed out to me when we played the other night, the downside, obviously, is that you're not checking anything off on your sheet when you get one of those.
Yeah.
So it has both some pros and cons related to it for sure.
Yeah, so by the end of the game, like we already mentioned before, you're really going to fill this out, right? You're going to have your routes everywhere. So I really like that look and feel. You feel like you built a bus route,
Yes.
right? And it even has like these little details of like the tickets that you're flipping over, they actually have holes punched
Yeah.
in them, like a bus ticket.
Yeah, they didn't need to do that, but they did, and that's a really cool
It really
thing.
gives it the feel of like, that's what we're doing.
Not to mention just this aesthetic overall. And I don't want to compare it too much to the original game that didn't get a wide release. But this one, they've definitely taken this sort of like 1950s,
Sure,
mid-late
yeah.
50s sort of vibe in terms of the artwork. And it really captures that. And these little touches like the holes that Emily just mentioned. But also, one big difference is that they use components, these little sticks that you're laying out to build your bus route. Whereas the old game, everyone had dry erase boards and you were using a marker.
Oh.
Well, you're using a dry erase board here and one out here. So
It's a lot of dry erase.
it was a lot of dry erase, but it wasn't as like like Emily said, when this is done, especially in a higher player count game,
Oh, you're
it
going to
is
see
a
them
really
everywhere.
cool, colorful network of roads that you've got networked together out there.
But what I love about this too is it's very accessible, right? Like we said, 12 rounds, goes very quickly, very easy to just knock out one game, do another. But it's also, because it's more puzzly, it's very chill environment, right? When you're just flipping a card, taking your turn, David takes his turn, we switch first player. It's very gratifying, the kind of turns you're having, but it goes very quickly, so you're always just wanting to play another.
Yeah, accessibility is definitely at top of the list with this thing. No, truth be told, we have played this at 2 players more than anything.
Yes.
I do want to play more on the flip side of this board because
It's much bigger.
It's a much bigger board. I'm sure I'm putting up a picture of it right now so you can see it. There isn't traffic built into it, but that's because when you're playing at higher player counts, you're just more bound to be sharing that traffic as it is. But that is Get On Board New York and London from Yellow. This one, if it's not out right now, it is coming out and it's going to be available very, very soon. If you have any questions about it at all, please make them in the comments below. Emily and I will try to get in there and answer whatever we can. And until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then. Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.